It's the final of the Aimchess Rapid Tournament, played online, part of the Champions Chess Tour. And in the final we have 23-year-old Vladislav Artemiev against world champion Magnus Carlsen. Very intriguing matchup. Artemiev, an unusual player. Openings not great, but middle game and end game plays very well. And of course we have Magnus Carlsen on excellent form. So here's the first game, and this is quite a treat. Starts out as an English, and it rapidly goes into a so-called semi-Tarrasch position. Carlsen plays a6. It looks like slightly strange, playing a pawn side of the move, but actually a very normal move here. It anticipates white perhaps taking on c5, and the bishop can always drop back here, and basically a6 is a useful move in potential IQP positions. White has lots of moves here. You can go b3, a3, but Artemiev takes on d5 and plays g3. So it's a slightly strange Tarrasch with the inclusion of the moves e3 and a6. And Carlsen reacts with c4. That's a move I like a lot. Black has this queenside overlap, this majority, and to break that down, really the bishop should be on this diagonal, but actually because g3 has been played, the bishop needs to come here, and it's not so easy to break down Black's control over c4. Funnily enough, Carlsen has had this position before, twice before, but on the white side, and didn't have a very good experience with it actually. So this has all been seen before in these two games. Rook e8 breaks down the knight on e5, because I mean the move you want to play here is f4, but it's not great because Black will play bishop f5 and controls e4. You can take here and play bishop e4. It positionally great for Black. So that's why Artemiev had to exchange off that bold knight on e5. And now he played b3, breaking down this pawn. So as I mentioned, Carlsen has seen this position twice before against Dubov and Mamedyarov. He drew against Mamedyarov. He lost against Dubov in a fantastic game. If you haven't seen that already, do check out my video. I recorded this, well, when it was played last December. You'll find the link, well, up there. Click on the I button, or down there somewhere where you'll work it out. It's a fantastic game that Dubov won. Dubov actually took here and played knight e4. Whoops, sorry, I'm being a bit loose with the arrows. He did this, and he won a beautiful attacking game. I mean, there are strong similarities between this game and the way Carlsen played today. But instead of taking on c3, Carlsen played a5. Actually, and that's how Mamedyarov played against Carlsen. I hope you're not too confused by this, by the way. a5, very logical move, because after b takes c4, but incidentally, Carlsen actually played queen c2 in this position and drew. But Artemiev took on c4, bishop a6, queen c2, and bishop takes c4. So very logical, bringing that bishop to this superb square on c4, very much as Dubov did, by the way. And already I like Black's position. Black has brought his minor pieces to these excellent outposts. That pawn on c6, a backward pawn, well, how does White get to that pawn? Very, very difficult. In the meantime, Black has all this wonderful activity, and also potential to attack on the king side, and you know, White doesn't have so many pieces there. Artemiev withdrew the bishop back to e1. Perhaps he's thinking about playing f3 and bishop f2, maybe. But h5, well, it's such a natural move. Black has excellent control in the middle of the board, so it seems completely appropriate to charge the h-pawn down the board. Queen d1 from Artemiev, so he brings the queen back where it controls this diagonal, so it might be important for defense. h4 played. The computer suggestion here is to actually take that pawn on h4. Now that is a very risky move. I'm not surprised Artemiev didn't do that. I mean, the rook can swing up the board and the queen comes across. This looks, well, for a start, a very inhuman way of playing. You know, black has potential to pick that up. I don't know, just doesn't feel right to me. Instead, Artemiev played g4 to keep the position closed. And there is potential, you know, much later on in the game to perhaps try to prove that this pawn is actually somewhat weak. You know, if you can play moves like f3, and obviously that opens up the bishop's diagonal. But anyway, we're a long way from that. I really like Carlsen's next move. So he's been working away on the king side, and now he switches back to the queen side, a4. Now that's an important move. I mean, one thing is that if the pawn is left here, then white can perhaps play a4, which would fix that pawn on a5. Also prevent black from closing the b file with bishop b5. So by playing a4, it obviously prevents white from playing a4. Also potentially targets that pawn as well. You know, you could play a3 to fix the pawn on a2. So that's why Artemiev played a3, but now that b3 square is available for the bishop. Hitting the queen. And here Carlsen played a very natural move, rook e6. In fact, there is a very interesting idea here instead of rook e6, and that's pawn to c5. Of course, a couple of ideas to take here and perhaps to push on. So white takes. The knight swings round. Very interesting idea. Potentially, there is a chance later on to break with d4 to open things up here. Watch out for the rook, I know, but even that is a little bit unclear when the king is under fire. But the main idea is actually to swing the knight into b3. So, for example, here. And the queen doesn't have a great square to go to, followed by knight b3, and that is extremely dangerous for white. This rook is potentially in trouble. But c5, it's not somehow not a natural move. It feels more natural to play the rook up to e6, where it has potential to attack on the king side. Defends the pawn. You know, you can perhaps, well, follow up with this move, queen g5. This is the game continuation. Very provocative move. I mean, you know, it could be possible to swing the rook here, but potentially play pawn to f5 as well. So, yeah, Artemiev is provoked into playing f4. And somehow the stakes are raised after this move, because if it all goes wrong for white, then the king is going to be more exposed. Also, that knight stands beautifully on e4, can't be driven away. But it does at least send the queen back. And now the bishop comes out. And here Artemiev went for f5. Pushing the rook backwards. You can also play g5. That's another interesting move, with the idea of bishop h3 as well. But f5, and the rook came back to e8. Queen e1. So it certainly seems as though Artemiev is fighting back now. But there are so many weak squares in white's position. I mean, notably, of course, the knight on e4. What a beautiful piece. And g5 as well. Carlsen played queen d8 to protect the pawn on h4. But it does sack a pawn. In fact, this sequence of moves, I think, is incredible from Carlsen. He spotted these ideas very quickly. He now sacrificed another pawn with h3. Really dynamic. He's 2 pawns down, but having got in h3, it means that white cannot stabilise very easily by playing h3 himself. So this bishop is kind of stuck here, because if the bishop retreats, then black will be able to take on g4, which really breaks through to the king. f5 would drop after that. So the bishop is stuck on h3 for the time being. And g4 is a little bit vulnerable. The queen also looks at e3. It's so hard for white to stabilize the position now. Carlsen understood that instinctively. And he was playing this when Artemiev was really down on time. Carlsen with a significant time advantage here. From memory, I think Artemiev had something like about a minute and a half left. Very difficult to hold everything together here. Queen e2 from Artemiev at least protects g4, and perhaps he can move the bishop back. Rook c8 from Carlsen. Pressure on the c-file. Now Artemiev played rook c1, as we're going to see a mistake. He could have taken, this is the best continuation, but he was obviously worried about that rook coming down to c2, and indeed that is very, very nasty to cope with, very nasty. You know, there's potential to play rook to f2. You know, there's queen h4 sometimes as well. But well, with best play, you know, white still has chances in this position, but not easy. But Artemiev played, to my mind, a very natural move, just holding the c-file. But maybe he forgot about bishop c4, breaking the communication between the rooks, splitting the rooks, hitting the queen. So if the queen moves, then simply rook takes rook. Now you can sack the exchange here, but it looks pretty hopeless. That pawn pushing down the board, the queen looking at these weak pawns, looks tremendous for black. Artemiev took the rook on c8. Carlsen took the queen, rook check, king h7. And here is the point. If rook c8 threatening mate, then it is black who gets in first. Well, it's mate in just a few moves. So bishop d2 holds this pawn for the moment. If knight takes, then, or perhaps there's a chance with rook c8, but of course bishop takes g4 just crashes through. I mean, I suspect that Artemiev simply missed bishop c4 rather than anything around here, and this is just game over. Bishop g2 played, and bishop f3 is curtains for white. But I have to say, yeah, there were mistakes by Artemiev, but I really like the way Carlsen played that game. Yeah, he didn't play all the best moves. Here, c5 looks like a really good idea. But the way he played was very logical. And particularly this moment, where he decided to just ditch a couple of pawns. And I think h3 is very impressive. You know, Carlsen really shows that he's match fit at the moment. And he went on to win game 2. He lost game 3 after a peculiar mouse slip. Drew game 4, so Carlsen won the first set, I think, pretty convincingly. So Artemiev with a lot of work to do in the second set tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, some of you might be watching this video later on Sunday, that is. One thing I want to mention is for PowerPlay merch, there is a sale going on at Teespring. They are offering a 10% discount just this weekend until September the 4th. So do check out the links to the Teespring PowerPlayChess shop, which you'll find in the description. You'll find it in the community on the channel. You'll find it in the comments as well. And if you put in the code, and the code I think is Sunset. Anyway, you'll see it in the description there. So 10% discount on PowerPlayChess merch this weekend. Do check it out for all your favourite PowerPlayChess merch, split rooks, pin and win, octopus knight, and so on. Stay tuned. I'll let you know what happens in the final as soon as The contest is over. Thanks for watching.